got it.
Frank, do you know if you will be invited to attend the meetings of the Housing Crisis Task Force so you can keep us informed?
Yeah, I'll definitely be attending and can come back with updates. But as the organizer, I'm also going to be like, I would hope all of y'all are there, emphasizing that we need tenant protections, especially if while we're visioning the development of housing production in our region.
Right, and you know, those are public meetings. That's a subcommittee of the council. So
Mhm.
we're all invited, so to speak.
And we don't know the dates yet. And so once we get that, I'll make sure this group gets the details for that.
Okay.
All right, thank you. So let's give the floor to Jessica Metzger, what is your official title?
My official title is Project Planner.
Project Planner. That's a nice title. Thanks for coming. And give a little background, of course, to what does it mean to talk about a housing element, and then the floor is yours.
Okay.
And so we'll have a little bit of time, I think, to interact with Jessica about the topics that she's going to raise here. And there are issues that I think some of us want to raise. A particular mention that Linda Honickman, representing League of Women Voters, has really been monitoring very carefully all of this, and I think will help guide what we want to communicate. So take it, Jessica.
Thank you, Rick. And thanks, Frank, too. I think the synergy between your efforts and the efforts on the housing element is just really good timing right now. So I think most of you, I've actually shown my video on the housing element too. If someone hasn't seen it, let me know and I'll put it in the chat. I don't think we need to waste time showing that again, unless you guys would like that. Think about that. But my name is...
Could you put it in the chat? Because I haven't seen it. That would be great.
Yeah, I'll do that for you right now, Rich. So I started at the city of Santa Barbara almost 4 years ago, and I was hired as a new position in the Long Range Planning Division of Community Development to work specifically on housing issues. And so I started out with amendments to the average unit size density incentive program, which I'm sure most of you have heard of, the AUD program, which was created back in 2013 through the current housing element to incentivize developers to build more housing in our community of Santa Barbara, specifically rental housing, which hadn't been built in the last 60 years before 2013. So leaving just a really big gap between the quality and housing conditions of rental properties from them to now. So I have been doing those development incentives, and because of them, we have had more housing being built in our community. But unfortunately, we have not had more affordable housing being built through these incentive programs. We have learned that developers will take those incentives and do as little as possible for affordable to low and moderate income populations, because they're looking at their bottom line and their pro forma, and they just want to make as much money as they can. It's a capitalist society that we live in. And so we have this new housing element that we are working on very rapidly right now as staff. And it's going to set out policies and programs for the next 8 years for housing in the community. And what we are really looking at with this housing element is there's really no more incentives to give to the development community, and that hasn't been successful in serving all of our populations. So we need to find other funding sources for housing. And I know a few of you were at our joint meeting with the Planning Commission and the City Council a couple of weeks ago, where we talked about different funding mechanisms that could be used to get more money to the Housing Authority so they can continue their good work and maybe even ramp up their production. So we're talking about looking at diverting transient occupancy tax, which is the tax that we collect from hotels, to a housing fund instead of going to the general fund. That's one of the first things that has been discussed, and one of the easiest things to do, because it doesn't take any sort of vote of the people. It's just a decision that is made by the city council and the city manager. I want to be cautious with this because people are starting to hear about it and talk about it a lot in the community. That is not something that can be made to stick. So if we fall into a recession next year, that money could easily be redistributed back to the general fund to pay for a number of other things the general fund pays for. So it's I would call it a Band-Aid solution in funding. We need to look at more serious long-term funding sources that would be a vote of the people to house or to fund housing in our community. Something like a vacancy tax on 3rd and 4th and 5th homes would be one of those options. And so that would be a vote of the people. Or looking at vacancy taxes on commercial buildings also. We could do that. These are both things that have been implemented in other jurisdictions. We could also look at doing an impact fee to hotel development that would be straight to housing. And the City Council and Planning Commission also spoke about a moratorium on hotels, or changing the zoning so hotels aren't allowed as prevalently as they are now. And this was basically in response to 2 of our most recent housing projects that had gone through the approval process of Design Review and Planning Commission, deciding to change their use to hotels. And that's a real problem that just amplifies our lack of housing, because every person that those hotels are going to be hiring will then be those low or middle income people who need more housing. And so we need to start holding our business community accountable for housing their employees, at least at that level of hotels. And so I've been coming to all the nonprofits that'll have me in the community to tell them about our housing elements, and to everyone kind of engaged in this process and thinking about it early, because our draft will be out for public review for the month of July. And we want to make sure that we get a lot of buy-in from the public on the programs and policies that we propose. We're also having a public meeting jointly with Goleta, Carpinteria, and the County of Santa Barbara on June 27th to talk about housing elements to the community and the residents, and really hoping to get people excited about the ability to make real big sweeping changes with this document to how housing has been happening in their next 8 years. So that's basically the gist of what we've been working on. And we're making good headway with the other nonprofits and housing advocates in the community that we've been speaking with on this issue. I just had a meeting with the Santa Barbara Foundation right before this. They're helping us to make sure that our workshop on the 22nd of June is really a bilingual experience, and that we're trying to reach equally all of our populations. And so, yeah, I can take any questions that you guys may have. And one thing I've been asking at each of these meetings is to please sign up for our interested parties list. This is an email list that will notify you when anything happens on the housing element. I just put that in the chat. And so when that public meeting comes up, you'll get an email reminder, like probably a month before, save the date, and then subsequently a couple more reminders before it. And it'll also allow you to then have those reminders to resend out to your contacts at your various organizations and personally to get them involved in the process also. Thank you. And you're on mute, sorry.
Let me ask one question about the bed tax, the TOT allocation. Is that at all possible immediately in the current budget cycle, or are we talking about, say, the next cycle a year from now? What's your understanding of that?
I actually don't know the answer to that one. We just started the budget cycle now, so each department is going to city council. They started last week. But I can get back to you on that. The way it was explained at the joint meeting, and Linda, you can tell me if you remember, but it was something that could happen rather immediately. It didn't have to wait till 2023.
Well, the problem is that there's supposed to be this budget crunch in the city, which I don't fully understand, but that kind of new use of revenue is going to be challenged by, I don't know, the city manager or the other members of the council or whatever, which is a little disappointing because I think some of us thought this could be something that could get going right away. It's something that the Housing Authority, Rob Fredericks, has advocated as a way of creating a consistent revenue stream compared to what they have to do now to get, beginning funding for new projects. And he's saying that something close to 150 units a year could happen if this allocation were to occur, which isn't a huge number, but it's certainly necessary. So anyway, thank you for that. I'm going to call on Linda because I know Linda, as I said, you've been following this admirably, and there are some key points that I think you want to make sure. The phase that you're seeking most public commentary on, Jessica, is the goals of the housing element, or is there more that?
At this point in time, the goals have been reviewed by City Council and Planning Commission at that joint meeting. And then they're going to be formally adopted, is not the right word, but the City Council is going to bless them on Tuesday of next week. So they had some edits to the goals. And so this Tuesday will be the first kind of step in the housing element process. And then when we get to the June meeting that we're holding with the other jurisdictions, we'll have some policies and program examples also. So at that point, the public can actually see policy and programs that each jurisdiction is proposing. And then the full draft of the document will be available for public review in July. So there's steps in this process.
And there'll be public hearings on each of those steps?
Yeah, so in July, we'll have a planning commission and a city council meeting. That's why it's important to sign up for the interested parties list, because there's a lot of places you can make your opinion heard.
Okay, Linda, take it.
Well, on the TOT, I know that Rob Fredericks was really hoping it would be something that would happen right away. They really need some seed money to get a lot of things going, to be able to apply for big grants and so on. So it's really important to get that as soon as possible. And my understanding is that it's the city administration that was kind of hoping that he would delay it a bit. I guess we're in the middle of the budget cycle, so it would wait until the end of this cycle in 1 year. But the hope is that the city council at least will commit to doing that right now, so that they'll kind of know that there are some funds coming. And I guess also we can all kind of keep up to date with what's going on with the budget, because maybe it won't be so bad, with the increases in tourism and all the things that are happening. I had a question about the the event, did you say June 22nd or 27th?
22nd.
22, okay. And is that going to be in person or Zoom or both?
We are still logistically working out if we can do Zoom because we're having it at the Faulkner Gallery in person. We're not sure how to exactly get that. We know we can record it there because we've done that before. Actually on my list of things next week to see if we can set it up for Zoom or not. Unfortunately, I think it might be difficult because I don't think the De La Guerra Plaza meeting was on Zoom, and they would have probably wanted that to be. It was in the same room a couple of weeks ago.
And do you have a time for that?
We're not releasing any more details until we know everything for sure. I have a meeting with the other jurisdictions next week to kind of finalize things, and then a save the date will go out by the end of the month with that kind of information.
And will it be a focus on the policies and programs that go under the goals? Or specifically, will there be a chance for people to look at maps and to say, you know, this is where we want a lot of affordable units?
So it's different for each jurisdiction because we're not all at the same time in creating our housing elements. So Golitas is done. So they're going to have all of the information for you to look at and comment on. We will be almost completed. And so we'll have maps of our sites inventory that we've identified for the public to review and comment on, along with the programs and policies. Not all the programs and policies, because we'll still be in draft form at that point, but enough to get a good input, like on the big important ones. And then for the county, the county and Carpenter probably won't be to the mapping stage yet, but they should at least have draft policies and procedures too. They're a little behind us.
So let me throw in this question about that. So is the purpose of this to really coordinate in some way planning more than it is now among these different jurisdictions? Is that what we're hoping for?
So we're trying to work together on this effort as much as we can. I mean, we start out by all being members of SBCAN and going through the numbers exercise of how many units each jurisdiction gets. But as far as having like coordinating policies and procedures, a little difficult because we're ahead of the game as the city with all of the incentives that we've already done, like not requiring parking in the downtown and having multifamily being allowed everywhere commercial is. A lot of jurisdictions, including some of them that are our neighbors, don't even have those yet. So their policies are kind of stepped back from us. Like they might not be thinking about funding as much yet. They might still be trying to do it through zone mechanisms.
Okay. I mean, one of the problems is that RENA numbers are applied to each of these jurisdictions, but wouldn't it be more rational if we could pool those numbers in some sense in terms of actually developing housing? But that's just my thought. So go ahead, Linda. I know you have concerns that I think you want to bring up, don't you?
Well, one issue is the goal input, because Jessica, do you know, I believe the mayor said at the last meeting that there would be no opportunity for public comment on Tuesday about the goals, that they were just going to do a vote. Is that your understanding?
At this point in time, that's what people are saying. I really hope in my heart that that's not the case.
Is that even legal? I mean, I would think it's not even on the consent agenda. It's a separate item.
Because it was a continued item and not a new item, it is legal under the Brown Act, but you still can submit your comments via email to the city clerk.
Right.
So no one can stop that from happening. And there's so much talk about public comment being opened in the community right now that I can't imagine that pressure won't release with it being opened, but it's a little out of my purview.
Well,
Okay.
Linda, you've asked a couple of the organizations that are represented here. Will we support some of the concerns you have? So why don't you just spell that out, if you
Yeah,
can?
I think really what I'm saying is, for a while, I've been making the argument just as an individual. This is before I got involved with the league, but my assumption is that we are losing our younger population, like the age 25 to 45, and that means fewer families. It just has a lot of implications that I think everybody would get behind if that's really true. And it's been kind of hard to prove that because I still haven't seen any 2020 census data that breaks down all the age groups compared to 2010. But in 2010, we had definitely been losing the younger population. We're just getting older. So I guess I'm really kind of asking, because to some extent, it's not very convincing if you just have one organization and one person continuing to talk about that. And that also relates to what I think is a lack of diversity. We're moving in the wrong direction in the city in particular. So I'm really kind of looking to see if other organizations agree with that and if they think it's important enough that all of us comment on it. Otherwise, I would be less inclined to push it, since we did write a letter about that already.
You're trying to get those issues that we can label the issue of diversity foregrounded in the goals. In other words, it should be a goal to try to stem the outflow of younger and of working class and of minority people from the city.
Yeah, I mean, there are a couple of issues. Goleta has a goal that specifically talks about the desirability of having a diverse community. So that's what I would add, something very similar to that. There's also the issue that I've been concerned about for a while, which is our lack of clarity in what the definition of workforce is, because it's continued to be a device, I think, which allows everybody to go forward saying, oh yeah, we want workforce housing. And what does that mean? That's actually above moderate, which is the same as market rate as far as RENA is concerned. So that, and also middle income is also another one, which is very misleading. It's not really middle income, it's again above average. So but that I don't think has to be a goal. That could be dealt with, I don't know, if there's a glossary section or something that would control that definition throughout the general plan.
So Jessica, can you comment on what Linda's pointing out? Do you think the goals already reflect what she's talking about, but not clearly enough perhaps, or what?
At this point in time, what the goals do is they're like the umbrella. And I think what Linda is talking about can be part of the policies underneath the goals umbrella, the way that they were set up. But that's just my own opinion. Like, of course, if you think it should be its own goal, that we should hear that via, well, you submitted that already, didn't you, Linda, in the public comment last
Yeah, I
time?
mean, I guess if we were going to write another letter as a league, we could focus on just that one goal, which was, I think goal 1 was where we added it, and maybe give some examples. And this also relates to the goals that were considered a couple of weeks ago, had the requirement of prioritizing deed restricted units. And now that has been kind of taken out as well. It's encouraged that they have deed restrictions, but I guess there are a couple of council people that want, for example, to be able to look at micro units. And maybe just because it's a really small unit, it doesn't have to be deed restricted as affordable. I don't, to me, it just becomes a hotel room if you have a really tiny unit and it's not deed restricted for affordability. I don't know why it wouldn't be expensive still. So I was disappointed to see that softened. And maybe that is something that could be dealt with as a policy. But the fact that they changed it because they're specifically thinking of the desirability of micro units tells me that they want to leave that in there. So I think it comes down to the council really has never committed to what they want. You know, there's lip service about affordability, but nothing's been said about, we really don't want to have the same trend that we've had over the years for demographics. We do want to be a more diverse community. We want to have more younger families moving in. And if you compare city of Santa Barbara to, or really almost anywhere in the South County compared to say North County or Ventura or Beverly Hills, we have many fewer kids. And, we have a fair number of older people, but I don't think we have as many as Beverly Hills percentage wise. So I really think there's a problem with that younger age group, which by the way is also talking that also relates to getting all the workers the opportunity to live close to work. So that's why that's also important.
Well, let's go back. By the way, before we go forward, I wanted to acknowledge Rebecca Garcia. She's joined us. Rebecca is up in Santa Maria, and she's recently elected as co-chair of SBCAN. Wonderful to have you at the table, Rebecca, as always. So Jessica, could you talk about maybe foreground that deed restricted point? What do we mean by this? That was an important statement with it to me within the goals that was mentioned. So how do you respond to what Linda's concern is? What do we mean by restricted and what's the issue there?
Yeah, so first I put a link in the chat to the staff report that has the goals we're talking about in it, so everyone can look at that at your leisure. When we presented the goals to City Council, that was staff's expert opinion. We use every word carefully. You don't know how long it took us to make those goals. There was like 6 of us in a room for like 4 hours. And so having them change through the political process is something that I've had happen my entire career. I think deed restricted is important, and I hate words like encourage because they don't have any power. And I also don't agree that microunits are just going to naturally be affordable because they're small, because that didn't work with the average unit density and size or density incentive program either. We're supposed to get smaller units that were more affordable. Instead, we got brand new units that looked great and we could rent for really high rents to people that could afford that. So this is why we need the community behind us in this housing element process. So it's not just Linda saying that we have more people coming out and saying you need to prioritize the deed restricted, because that's the only way we're going to get that low and moderate income housing stock to grow in a substantial way.
Why don't you spell out what you mean by deed restricted?
Oh, so deed restricted is when a unit is built and then a covenant is recorded against that unit, that it has to be kept at a certain income level, and it can be one of the variety of income levels depending on how the development is being built, either very low, low, or moderate income. And it's a covenant that lasts for 90 years. And so if it's a condominium or an apartment, it sticks on a certain unit in that development for that time.
And are there private developers who are willing to do deed restricted kinds of housing?
So in 2019, we reviewed the AUD program and realized that no, only the Housing Authority and People's Self-Help and Habitat and other builders of affordable housing will do deed restricted housing by choice. Everyone else has to be told that it's part of the law that they do it. And so we created what's called an inclusionary housing ordinance that requires 10% of every development to be set aside for an affordable unit. So if you build 10 units, one of those has to be deed restricted at affordable for moderate is the inclusionary. And then the state realized this was a problem a while ago as well. And so they made a program called Density Bonus. And so the Density Bonus program allows a developer to go above what a jurisdiction's top density is. And those units that are above the top density are then also deed restricted for low or very low, depending. There's a lot of factors that go in on how they decide and how many. But those are the two laws that require the deed restricted, because we just weren't getting it by goodness of heart.
So the inclusion of that in your goals is intended to go beyond simply the inclusionary idea of 10%. It's to really prioritize deed restricted housing in the available spaces that exist, right? That's
Right.
the point.
And one of the sorry to interrupt you, but one of the
No.
ways to do that, that would be a program, would be something else that Mr. Fredericks talked about, which was, why are these nonprofits paying fees to build these housing units to the city? Why aren't we waiving all or some of the fees? Because a lot of money goes into just the process of doing the plans at the city level before it even gets to the construction and everything that goes into hard and soft costs there. So you would have the goal of prioritizing deed restricted, and then this program itself was waive fees by however much it ends up being for nonprofits to build housing. And so that would hopefully further more deed restricted housing.
So you think there's some point in us coming Tuesday or communicating that the deed restriction should be more than encouraged, but foregrounded and prioritized and so language like that? Is that?
I think that Linda's a champion of that, and it's never bad to have multiple voices saying the same thing.
And also there were a lot of, I would say it seemed like the majority, but certainly a good number of the commissioners and the council members wanted to keep deed restrictions. So I don't think that would be a real hard sell. I just wanted to make the point in answer to Dick's question about, is this only public developers or nonprofit developers? What we're hoping is that there will be more partnerships in the future. And we do have the example of the RTA with the County Housing Authority. They're now doing 3 different developments where there's a good percent of affordability.
Right.
And it's sort of like 2 parts of the same side. And I think there's a lot of opportunity for that at La Cumbre, for example, where there is a lot of land. And you have a lot of, well, at La Cumbre, you don't start with free parking lots, but I think there will be a way of taking over some property for
You're
that.
talking about La Cumbre Plaza, right?
Yes, shopping mall, yeah.
As a big space for possible housing, right?
Yes.
So I think I want to reinforce what you're saying. It seems to me somewhat historic and important that these partnerships are developing at the county level, and hopefully could be in the city, between the housing authority and private developers, in which much more than 10%, it's more like almost half the housing would be affordable, and low income affordable, right? In the case of the Goleta project that we're talking about right now.
Correct. And just
Okay.
one other thing, Rob Fredericks has said that there are developers that come to him and want to partner with the housing authority. And he has told them that if they will do a higher percent of affordable, say 30%, then he would be happy to partner with them. So I think there's definitely, we're pretty close to making that work, I think.
So, Jessica, is it fair to say what you're trying to make as the goal with deed restriction dovetails or meshes with these possible developments in the among the developers, right? Is that
Yes, yeah, these partnerships.
okay? Well, so this is enlightening to us because we're looking for every path we can for pursuing the affordability goals that we most of us, I think, are very committed to. Um, and let's just ask the second point of Linda's, which is how we because Linda's been arguing about the definition of workforce housing. Is she putting her finger on something very important, namely that workforce housing without clarity ends up being above market, above moderate housing? Is that a real concern in your mind?
Well, to step back, if we used that term in the housing element, it would have a sure definition. Most likely, we won't be using that term because everyone has a different idea of what that means. Like you hear some people saying workforce housing is baristas at Starbucks, and then some people saying that's firemen. Like gap in wage there is like ridiculous. We really should stick to calling things out as how we report them for RENA. So very low, low, moderate, and above moderate. We shouldn't try to make words that everyone doesn't have a clear idea of what they are.
Great. So other issues that anyone wants, or questions people want to raise with Jessica about the housing element. I think we have a sense that we need to keep geared up for the public comment as the process goes forward. And to just sum up again, I think personally that groups like SBCAN, which is organized this roundtable, we should make clear that we really do want to prioritize quote unquote deed restricted housing. And if we can get something communicated to council before the Tuesday meeting, I think that would be the one point that we really could focus in on and address it to. I don't understand. Did you tell us, Linda, that it was Megan Harmon who wanted to modify that language? And you
She's
think
one of a couple of people, and apparently it is because of, and I think this is something that AIA has been pushing for. They do want to be able to build a lot or consider building a lot of micro units. So
they ought to make that clear if that's what's going on here. But I think the concern that we can express is that by changing that language, we may be reducing the necessity of prioritizing deed restricted housing in the use of scarce, is this a fair way to put it? Scarce land for affordable housing exists. It should be prioritized for deed restricted kinds of development. Is that a fair statement, Linda or Jessica? I'm just trying to urge my staff of SBCAN to draft something like that, and or I can do it. We'll talk about it.
well, they want to keep their goals as short as possible. So that's the only issue. You want to just add one or two words if
That's right.
possible.
That's
Yeah.
right. Okay. Any other points on the housing element? There's one other topic. Rebecca Garcia is here. She has an issue in the North County that I'm sure many of us down here know nothing about, but it's something important on Cause's agenda and other groups up in the North County. Rebecca, do you want to talk about this? Is she off? Not here.
She might have just stepped away for a second, but yeah, were there any other questions for Jessica while we still have her here?
I was just gonna say really quickly, like, really appreciate all your work, Linda, and the thought with the League of Women Voters on this, because I think it's really good to push on making sure we have the ability of housing stock for a diverse community, and making sure that we contend with the workforce housing being something that we're talking about low income, we're talking about service workers, we're talking about hotel workers that we want to be here. So just to say, really appreciate those pushes. And as we get into the policy pieces, I know there's going to be a lot that we hope to support and pushing with that.
Great, thank you.
Frank. So thank you, Jessica, very much for all the work you're doing. I know it can be very frustrating from many points of view. And thanks for sharing time with us on this. And maybe we'll see you again in the future.
Thank you. And please sign up for that interested parties list before the chat goes away. And I also put the link to the city clerk to send emails to city council for Tuesday. Have a good weekend, everyone.
Thank you, dear.
Bye.
Hey, Rebecca, so I already introduced you as wanting to talk about the issue that you came to talk about. So why don't we turn it over to you?
Well, yeah, hello everyone. Sorry that I had to pop in and out. We're pretty busy today, but thank you for letting me join. Yeah, so I came, and I'll try to be as brief as possible. I talked about this at the North County Roundtable yesterday, and we talked about it, I think, a lot more in depth. So if you have any questions after, please feel free to call me. But essentially, Tuesday, May 17th, there's going to be a vote at the county level where they're going to be approving a study to extend the Santa Maria Levee Trail to the city of Guadalupe. So it's essentially what's happening. But this campaign has been going on for almost a year now, led by our youth, who really want to see more green spaces available to our community. Communities of color are 3 times more likely to live in areas that are nature deprived. And that's true for Santa Maria. One of the statistics that I found in some of my research that is crazy to me still is that Santa Maria only has access to 8 miles of trails with 2 different walking options to go to, while Santa Barbara has over 130 miles of trails with 52 options, meaning 52 trails that they have within their city limits, right? That disparity is crazy, especially when we remember that Santa Maria is the biggest city in the county. It also has the highest percentage of BIPOC residents, and not just BIPOC, right? Vulnerable communities. We have farm workers, indigenous folks who speak indigenous languages, working class communities. It's people who need access to space to move around and be safe. So the list goes on for reasons of why we really want to see this trail extended, but that's really the heart of it when we're talking about this vote on Tuesday. Unfortunately, we don't have the votes of our North County supervisors. So we're really counting on South County supervisors to see how important this is, not just for Santa Maria, but for the county to invest in communities of color, to make sure that there are spaces to green or access to green spaces across the county, not just in one part, right? And so there's a few ways that we're asking folks to support. One of them is we have this one-click email. It sends off a pre-draft, pre-written email, kind of in anticipation of the meeting. So I'll paste that right now. But we're also asking folks to go to the vote and make public comment. There's a few different ways to do so, whether you go in person in Santa Barbara, there's also space to do that in Santa Maria. But there's also a few virtual options, calling in advance and they'll call you back, or whether you want to join via Zoom. So anyways, I try to be super brief, but there's a lot of details there. So I do want to leave room for any questions folks have.
Questions? Oh, there's Jeannie too. Okay, Linda, yeah.
Well, what is the ask? Is there a lot of money involved to buy land, or what needs to happen?
Yeah, that's a good question. So talking about the trail more specifically, the trail, there's a trail that exists now that's called the Santa Maria Levee Trail. And there's a portion that is not accessible to the public, but already exists that extends pretty far down, not all the way to Guadalupe, but pretty far down, that mostly like ag and the county has access to, because that land belongs to the county. The part where there's resistance or the strongest opposition is from growers who don't want the trail to exist alongside the fields. And so their main arguments are that folks are going to vandalize, that folks are trespassing and going to steal fruit or whatever it may be, right? Arguments that are criminalizing the folks who live here, right? Like people already use it to some extent. And yeah, so that's the main opposition right now. Growers are like, we just don't want people to come and, you know, walk all over our fields. With the assumption that people won't take care of the trail, which they will.
Can I point out an irony in that is the farmers are giving an option, an alternative is to go along Highway 166, Main Street, and to go that route instead, but that runs along farm fields too. So what do they have against people being on the levee rather? I mean, people are already going along farm fields everywhere in Santa Maria because there are farms everywhere in Santa Maria.
Yeah.
So why is it that they're really opposing the levee versus every place else? It doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
And I want to add a little background. Ken asked me to come here and I'm just looking at my notes from when I worked with the county. Back in 1992, we were originally approached by the city to get the levee as a bikeway to use the levee as a bikeway from Santa Maria to Guadalupe. And because the farmers were opposing it at that time, it didn't go forward. And then again in 1996, we started a new effort to get that bikeway open that is open in the city of Santa Maria, but it's limited to the city of Santa Maria because of the opposition of the farmers. And the hope was back then, okay, if we get it started, we'll show how well it can work and then we can extend it later. Of course, Urbanski and left the office. I left the office. And nobody picked it up until recently with Cause and everybody else working on it. But it's been in the Bikeway Regional Master Plan for 30 years, more than 30 years, and it needs to go forward.
Yeah, thank you for that context, Jeannie.
And if I could add, Jeannie's putting in a 600-word op-ed to Santa Maria Times today. So that's why she wasn't in the meeting earlier, because she's working on that right now on this topic.
Margaret Cooley gave me a 3 o'clock deadline to get it to her. So I went and I pulled out an old file folder of mine from the garage that has notes from when we were working on this bike path to refresh my memory of, because I knew we worked on it. I just don't remember all the details. And I'm like, when did we start with this? So yeah, so I've been looking over my notes and rewriting the wonderful editorial that Nadia started and putting the context in there.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful context, and I'd love to draw on that for the public comment that I will give, unless you're planning to say something similar to go to the meeting. But
it never hurts to say it more than once, because
right, true,
listening. So
So is there a good chance of passage, or is it still bad?
the chance well, Rebecca knows better on that, but it's probably the two South County and the one supervisor who crosses the North and the South County that may vote for it. We've heard that the North County supervisors are not for it, which doesn't make sense because it's their constituents who would benefit. It's also the farmers' employees who would benefit. I don't know how much that has come out, but they're the ones who are closest to this field, to the levees, and they could access the levees and it'd be a benefit to their workers. Why not do something nice for your workers?
Yeah, I mean, we're hoping, we're counting on their 3 votes. I mean, we've been in communication with Joan Hartman, and I think she is really hopeful that the other 2 are, will be in agreement. But I think the biggest thing is showing that there's support countywide to really push them and keep them accountable to that, right? Because when growers turn out against something, they really turn out, and we have to count on supervisors seeing that the support from constituents and people who live here and who really need it are worth the investment. Because when it comes to North County stuff, that voice is always going to have power to shut projects down. And we can't let that happen. We can't let that happen. I think we really have a lot of support from all sorts of folks to make it actually possible. So, oh, Sarah, do you have a question?
Yeah, I do. It would only make sense to have places where people could walk, and if you don't want people to be walking on the freeway, walking on the levee to get to where we can get a safe places where we can walk, where we can hike. It just makes sense. Ever since I gave up driving, folks, that it's safety and knowing where to walk is critical. And if you have something that has nice nature, that can become like a spiritual pilgrimage. It's like, have they ever watched the movie The Way, with the Camino de Santiago de Compostela? I mean, this is perfect. This is getting close to nature and to the land in which we stole, and be able to maybe have kind of like say, this is where, and have a little postage of where your native or indigenous people lived, and what was, if there was a village, it could be educational. It has a lot of possibilities, people.
That sounds exciting. Lawanda.
Gina, did I hear you say that the original agreement was that they would extend at some point, or did I not hear that correctly?
It was written to the circulation element of the general plan that there would be they would want to have a bikeway on the levee from Santa Maria to Guadalupe. And that was more than 30 years ago. That was into the plan. So that's been around, but there's never been an agreement to do it. The agreement, and it's funny because I pulled out a note from Richard Quant, who was the president of the Grower Shipper Vegetable Association, which spent like a 40-something page thing opposing this. When Stoker had talked to the Agricultural Committee about the city's desire to develop the bikeway along the top of the levee from Sway Crossing to Guadalupe. And I think that's when their opposition began, was way back in '92. So there's a long history of farmers opposing it. And
so what is their opposition? Just that you're gonna walk on maybe a little tiny piece of their land, or what?
Well, they're afraid that dogs are gonna poop on their land and ruin their crops, because there is a food safety issue, but the fallacy in that argument is that can already happen, and people already do have access to their fields. They're not going to have any greater access than they have now. And their proposed alternative is on Highway 166, which is Main Street that goes to Guadalupe. And that's all along the farm field. So how is that any better? It's just, I don't get it. It doesn't make sense. And I just think they're digging in for, I don't know what reason.
Well, I will admit, guys, because I do a lot of walking around town, and it amazes me the number of people who do not pick up their dog poop. I mean, there is a lot of dog poop out there.
Yeah, that is a problem. The only thing is that opening the levee doesn't necessarily make that worse, because it's already a possibility. They can already walk. There might be more people that are attracted to go to certain points to access the levee, but they can already go through the farm fields. And maybe by having it access with some maintenance by the city, maybe there could be some greater cleanup efforts anyway.
So I think, Rebecca, we should say something about beds along the way.
About what?
Having beds along the way so they can,
yeah, well, actually,
you don't have an excuse then if you have beds and can pick up your poop and you just don't. But I think that would help us.
Actually, I think the main thing that they're going for, and that, we feel is a fine compromise, is to just not make it accessible to pets, because once we go down the line of letting pets go into the trail, So I think that's at least where they're at now. We're opening it first just to humans and then later exploring another option, because they were also really concerned about horses, and we're just just let people use the trail and we can figure out the rest later.
They're also worried about human excrement, and they talked about homelessness, and that I would really like like not to close it to dogs, because dogs are allowed on the part of the trail that exists right now, then it would really make a quandary. But I think that we should make the argument that that dogs can be picked up after, and maybe that, you know, one of the things they said was they would like to see restrooms placed at certain openings so that people would not be pooping in their fields. And they're talking about there would be more homeless people living there. Well, the homeless people can go out into the riverbed already. That's not going to make it any more popular, and actually make it less popular, because then there's going to be more people, and people who are houseless would like to have some privacy. So I think that's a fallacious argument too. But I would really like to see restrooms at some openings. It's a long trail. You know, they have some restrooms that people can go and relieve themselves.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think this is, if anything, this is just like, it's the first battle, for lack of a better word. Like, let's just get them to move forward with the project, and then we'll have the option of exploring what it can look like and really imagining something nice for our community. But the first step is just getting it to go through before we get to that step. So if anyone has any questions, please feel free. I'll put my information. And then Nadia, I sent an email to you with like all of the details. Would it be easier if I just sent that to you, or how can I get information out to everyone?
Yeah, I can forward that to everyone here, and we'll also be sending something out to our email list, which I think everyone here is on anyway. So yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. I would like any other points on this or any other topic. I want to remind everyone that tomorrow at noon is the national moment for mass protest with respect to Roe v. Wade. And so De La Guerra Plaza here in Santa Barbara, I don't know, there are other locations in the region that people are gathering. Does anyone know? Okay, so that's your marching order for today, as it were. And any other points, announcements? We can enjoy the beautiful day today, and take care of yourselves. Thanks for your civic engagement.
Thank you, Dick.
Take care.